The suitcases stood ready by the door, packed with methodical care, just like everything else I'd done in our 15 years together. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from my parents, chimed midnight as the front door finally opened. Sarah breezed in, coat draped casually over one arm, the faint scent of wine and expensive perfume announcing her late-night priorities. "I got the attention I wanted," she announced with a smile that never reached her eyes, dropping her keys on the entryway table without looking at me. "Your bags are ready," I replied, my voice steady despite the months of preparation for this moment. The silence that followed stretched between us like the years of accumulated disrespect. Years I wouldn't reclaim, but wouldn't continue adding to either. Have you ever reached the point where dignity finally outweighs obligation? This is that story. The conference room erupted in applause as I closed the presentation. Our team had just salvaged a project that, 12 hours earlier, seemed destined for catastrophic failure. A database integration problem had threatened to derail the Henderson account, one of our largest clients, until I'd organized an overnight response team, identified the core issue, and implemented a solution. "John saves the day again," remarked Dennis, our department head, clapping me on the shoulder. "I don't know anyone who handles a crisis with such composure." I smiled, accepting the compliment with a nod. Just doing my job. Everyone pulled together when it mattered. As the room cleared, I checked my watch, a habit Sarah had recently begun to mock. "Still wearing that thing?" Nobody under 50 uses watches anymore. The memory of her words stung more than I cared to admit. The watch had been a gift from my father when I landed my first management position. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, our 15th anniversary. I'd made reservations at Bellini's, where we'd had our first date. Sarah had canceled our last 3 dinner plans for work emergencies, but surely anniversary night would be different. "Table for 2 at 7 o'clock, I confirmed with the restaurant. "And could you arrange for a bottle of the 2018 Barolo to be waiting? It's our 15th anniversary." The hostess's warm congratulations made me smile. 15 years. Despite recent tensions, that milestone meant something. Back at my desk, I opened the small velvet box containing the diamond earrings I'd selected weeks ago. Classic, elegant, just like Sarah had been when we met. Before marketing director became executive vice president. Before success started meaning something different to each of us. "Hot date tonight?" asked Lisa from accounting, noticing the gift box. "Anniversary," I replied. 15 years. "Wow, congratulations." "That's impressive these days." I nodded, though a voice in my head whispered, "Is longevity still impressive when the quality has deteriorated?" I pushed the thought away. Tonight would be different. I'd make sure everything was perfect. At home, I showered and changed into the charcoal suit Sarah had once said brought out my eyes. I arrived at Bellini's 20 minutes early to ensure everything was arranged. The corner table with the city view, the wine breathing, the small arrangement of calla lilies, her favorite. At 7:15, I texted, "Table ready whenever you are." At 7:30, "Everything okay?" At 7:45, my phone finally rang. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, though her voice lacked genuine regret. The Westridge presentation ran long, and then Marcus wanted to discuss strategy changes. "I'm heading out now." I swallowed my disappointment. "No problem. The reservation's secure." When she finally arrived at 8:20, she was still on her phone. "I'll email you the revisions tonight," she told whoever was on the other end as she sat down, not even making eye contact with me. "Sorry," she mouthed, finally hanging up. "Absolute chaos today." "Happy anniversary," I said, sliding the small box across the table. "Oh, I completely—" She had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. With everything happening at work, it slipped my mind. I maintained my smile. It's fine. Open it. Her reaction to the earrings seemed genuine, a flash of the woman I'd married. John, they're beautiful. I thought they'd look perfect with that black dress you wore to the Richards party. They absolutely will. She leaned across to kiss my cheek, then immediately checked her vibrating phone. Sorry, I need to see if this is Marcus. I took a slow sip of wine, watching as her attention disappeared into the screen. It wasn't Marcus. I could see the shopping app notification from where I sat. How was your day? She asked, finally setting the phone down. Actually, pretty interesting. We had a crisis with the Henderson account. Her phone rang. She glanced at it, then at me. I should take this. It's Alicia from the marketing team. Of course, I said, the rest of my story evaporating. She stood, walking toward the restaurant entrance for better reception. I sat alone, noticing the waiter's sympathetic glance as he refilled my water glass. When the dessert arrived, tiramisu to share, as we had on our first date, Sarah was still absent. By the time she returned, the dessert had sat untouched for 15 minutes. Sorry about that, she said, sliding back into her seat. Now, what were you saying about Henderson? I started again, explaining the database crisis, but her eyes dropped to her phone twice during my abbreviated version. That's great, she said when I finished, though her response came a beat too late. You've always been good at putting out fires. The compliment felt hollow, like she was describing a reliable appliance rather than a husband. At home later that night, Sarah went straight to her laptop, claiming a deadline for the morning presentation. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her type furiously, completely absorbed. I'm going to bed, I said. Mm-hmm, she responded without looking up. I'll be a while still. In bed, I stared at the ceiling, reviewing the evening. Once, Sarah would have celebrated my project save, asked questions, been genuinely interested. Once, our anniversary would have been blocked off weeks in advance, non-negotiable. I reached for the nightstand drawer, pulling out a small leather journal I'd bought weeks ago but hadn't used. On the first page, I wrote the date and a simple entry. Anniversary dinner. Arrived 45 minutes late. Took 3 calls. Forgot the occasion entirely. When exactly did I become an inconvenience in my own marriage? It felt dramatic, seeing the words written down, but it also felt necessary, like documenting a pattern I'd been trying not to see. John? John Anderson? I turned to see a vaguely familiar face at the industry mixer. After a moment's hesitation, I placed him, Robert Chen, husband of Sarah's colleague, Melissa. Robert, good to see you. How's Melissa? Thriving as always. She and Sarah have been working crazy hours on the Westridge campaign. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Though I hear you two had quite the argument about the bedroom renovation. Melissa said the whole office was talking about it. My smile froze in place. The bedroom renovation discussion had happened in our home behind closed doors. It had been a private disagreement about priorities. I'd suggested we repair the roof before updating perfectly functional decor. I'm sorry, I managed. Robert looked suddenly uncomfortable. Oh, I thought Sarah mentioned it during their planning lunch. Something about what did Melissa call it? Your charming but outdated approach to home improvement priorities. The revelation hit like ice water. Our private disagreements were office entertainment. Sounds like I need to work on my interior design instincts, I said lightly, though my stomach had tightened into a knot. Hey, I'm with you, man. Melissa wants to redo our kitchen for the 3rd time in 7 years. These executive wives, right? He paused. Or executive and wife in Sarah's case. I excused myself shortly after. adding a new entry to my mental catalog of concerning patterns. 2 weeks later, I stood beside Sarah at her company's quarterly celebration. The event was being held at an upscale hotel downtown, with impressive views and an open bar that guaranteed people would mingle longer than necessary. "John, this is Devin Hayes, our new creative director," Sarah said as a young man approached. "Devin, my husband, John." "Nice to meet you," Devin said, shaking my hand. "What do you do, John?" Before I could answer, Sarah jumped in. "John's a project manager at Baxter Systems." Her tone carried a subtle dismissal I'd begun noticing more frequently. "Just a project manager," I added with deliberate emphasis, watching Sarah's expression. She didn't notice, or chose not to acknowledge, my pointed comment. "John's very reliable," she continued, as if describing a family sedan. "He keeps things running smoothly while the rest of us take all the risks." Devin laughed, clearly following Sarah's lead. "Someone's got to keep the lights on while the visionaries do their thing, right?" I maintained my smile, years of professional diplomacy coming to my aid. "Exactly. Though occasionally we reliable types also save multi-million-dollar accounts from imploding, as I did last month with Henderson." Sarah's phone buzzed. "Excuse me," she said, stepping away without acknowledging my comment. "So, project management," Devin said, clearly searching for conversation. "That must be fascinating, challenging, critical to company success," I suggested. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "All of the above, I'm sure." I spotted Mark Johnson, our neighbor, across the room. Mark worked for a company that occasionally partnered with Sarah's firm, which explained his presence tonight. "Excuse me, Devin. Good to meet you," I said, making my way toward Mark. Mark greeted me with genuine warmth. "John, didn't expect to see a friendly face here." "Mark, thank God. I need normal human interaction before I calcify into a reliable project manager statue." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like there's a story there." "Just the usual corporate posturing. How's Jennifer?" "Home with a cold." "How's Sarah enjoying her new position?" I glanced across the room where Sarah was holding court with several executives, her laugh carrying across the space. "Thriving, as always." Mark gave me a measured look. "And how are you?" Something in his tone suggested he wasn't just making conversation. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I've been better." Mark nodded toward the terrace doors. "Fresh air?" Outside, the evening air provided welcome relief from the crowded reception. "I heard Sarah's introduction," Mark said after a moment. That wasn't right. I stared out at the city lights. Am I being oversensitive? It's just her work persona. "John, I've known you both for what, 8 years now? That wasn't her work persona. That was dismissive." Hearing someone else name it loosened something in my chest. "It's been happening more frequently." At first, I thought it was just stress from her promotion. "Has it improved as she settled in?" "The opposite." I hesitated, then continued. "Did you know our private disagreements are apparently lunchtime entertainment at her office?" Mark winced. "That's crossing a line." I'm beginning to realize there are several lines being crossed. I hadn't intended to have this conversation, but now that it had started, the words kept coming. "Our anniversary last month. She forgot completely, showed up nearly an hour late, took multiple calls during dinner." "That's not stress, John. That's disrespect." The word hung between us. Disrespect. I'd been avoiding naming it, finding excuses, making allowances. "Jennifer noticed it at the neighborhood barbecue last summer," Mark continued. "The way Sarah interrupted you, checked her phone while you were speaking. She asked me afterward if everything was okay between you two." I felt a strange mix of validation and embarrassment. Others had noticed what I'd been trying to ignore. "What are you going to do?" Mark asked. "Talk to her, I suppose. Try to address it directly." Mark nodded. "Just be prepared. In my experience, people who disrespect others don't suddenly develop self-awareness when confronted." As we walked back inside, I spotted Sarah across the room. She was introducing someone else's husband, her hand on his arm, giving him her full attention. The contrast to her introductions of me was stark. That night, I added another entry to my growing journal: company event. Sarah introduced me as just a project manager 3 times, dismissed Henderson account save, shared private arguments at office. Mark confirmed it's a pattern others have noticed. Need to address directly. I closed the journal, feeling a strange combination of clarity and sadness. The pattern was becoming undeniable. "I thought we could talk," I said, sitting across from Sarah at our kitchen table. It was Tuesday evening, deliberately chosen because Sarah rarely scheduled late meetings on Tuesdays. She glanced up from her tablet. "About?" "Us. Our communication patterns lately." She set the tablet down, though her fingers remained on it. "What about them?" I'd rehearsed this conversation mentally, determined to be clear without being accusatory. "I've noticed some concerning patterns. The missed dinners, the phone interruptions, the way you sometimes speak about me to others." "What are you talking about?" Her tone suggested genuine confusion, which wasn't what I'd expected. "At your company event last week, you introduced me as just a project manager several times. You dismissed the Henderson account save as me being reliable." She rolled her eyes. "You're being too sensitive. That's just office banter." "And our anniversary dinner, taking 3 calls, arriving almost an hour late?" I apologized for that. "Work has been crazy. You know that." "I do know that. But I also know you've never missed a meeting with Marcus or the executive team, no matter how last minute." Her expression hardened slightly. "Are you seriously comparing my career obligations to dinner plans?" "Not dinner plans. Our 15th anniversary, which you forgot entirely." I said I was sorry about that. "What more do you want?" I took a deep breath. "I want to understand why our private disagreements are being discussed at your office lunches." That landed. Her eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "Who told you that?" "Does it matter? It happened." It was probably just a passing comment. "You're making this into something it's not." "What is it then, Sarah?" "It's you being insecure about my success. I have more responsibilities now, more demands on my time. Instead of supporting me, you're keeping score and making me feel guilty." Her deflection technique was masterful, but I recognized it now. "This isn't about your success. I've always supported your career." "Have you? Because it feels like you're threatened by it." I shook my head, realizing this was going nowhere. "I'm not threatened. I'm concerned about the growing distance between us, about being treated with basic respect." "I respect you," she said automatically, but her phone buzzed, and her eyes immediately flicked to the screen. "See? That right there. We're having an important conversation, and you can't even stay present for it." "It could be important." "More important than this?" She picked up the phone, checked it, then set it down again. It was just an email notification, but the damage was done. "Sarah, we need to figure this out. Something's not working between us." "What's not working is your sudden need for constant validation." "I'm busy, John. I have a demanding career." "If you need more attention, maybe you should find a hobby or reconnect with friends." The conversation continued in this vein for another 20 minutes, circular and frustrating. Sarah deflected, minimized, and eventually claimed she needed to prepare for a morning meeting. As she retreated to her home office, I sat alone at the kitchen table, processing. It had gone exactly as Mark had warned. No self-awareness, no accountability, just deflection and counterattack. I added to my journal that night, attempted direct conversation. Result, deflection, gaslighting, you're too sensitive, blame shifting, I'm insecure about her success. No acknowledgement of actual concerns. The annual neighborhood barbecue arrived the following Saturday. Normally, I looked forward to these gatherings, casual, friendly, a chance to connect with neighbors we rarely saw despite physical proximity. Sarah had initially planned to skip it for a work brunch, but changed her mind at the last minute. Actually, I should make an appearance, she'd said. It's good for our social standing in the neighborhood. We arrived together, but separated almost immediately. I found myself by the grill with Mark and several other neighbors, discussing local sports teams and property values, comfortable, inconsequential topics that nonetheless felt refreshingly genuine. Sarah circulated through the gathering, glass of wine in hand, clearly in networking mode rather than relaxation mode. Eventually, she joined our group, standing close beside me, but somehow creating distance through her posture. "So, Sarah, how's the new position?" asked Paul, a retired doctor from 3 doors down. "Challenging, but rewarding," she replied, slipping into her professional voice. "I'm leading our largest accounts now, completely restructuring our approach to digital integration." "Sounds impressive," Paul said, "though I barely understand half those terms." Sarah laughed. "Well, it's specialized work. Not everyone has the capacity or drive for that level of intensity." Something in her tone made me tense slightly. I'd heard this preamble before. "Speaking of which," she continued, turning to include the whole group, "you should have seen John's face when I mentioned our department's growth targets. Complete deer in headlights." She laughed as if sharing a charming anecdote. "He's happy in his comfortable project management role. I guess one of us has to carry the household's ambition." The group's reaction was a mixture of awkward chuckles and uncomfortable glances. I felt heat rise in my face, not from embarrassment, but from anger. "Different priorities," I said evenly. "I value work-life balance." "Balance is just code for afraid to really commit," Sarah replied with a dismissive wave. "But it's cute. John's my steady rock while I take all the risks." Mark caught my eye, his expression confirming what I already knew. This was beyond inappropriate. "I'm going to grab another beer," I said, needing space before I said something I couldn't take back. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, processing what had just happened. This wasn't subtle undermining or private dismissal. This was public humiliation, deliberate and unapologetic. Mark appeared a moment later. "You okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "That was way over the line, John." I nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't sound petty or wounded. "Jennifer would have my head if I ever spoke about her that way," Mark continued. "That wasn't a joke or banter. That was disrespect," I finished. The drive home was silent. Sarah seemed oblivious to any issue, checking emails on her phone while I navigated the familiar streets. At home, she immediately headed upstairs to change, mentioning something about catching up on work. Alone in our living room, I opened my laptop to check my own emails. A notification appeared for our shared calendar. Curious, I clicked it. Our anniversary trip, a long weekend to Napa Valley we'd planned months ago, had been deleted. In its place was a conference in Chicago, National Marketing Executive Summit. Frowning, I opened our travel folder. The flight and hotel reservations for Napa were still there, not yet canceled. I searched Sarah's email for information about the Chicago conference. The confirmation email appeared, dated 3 weeks ago, well before she'd mentioned any conflict with our anniversary weekend. She'd registered for the conference, booked flights and accommodation, all without a single word to me. Our anniversary plans, the plans I'd made at her request for something special for 15 years, were simply erased without discussion or even notification. I sat back, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a communication failure. This was deliberate deception. I walked outside to our small backyard, needing air and space. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. I sat on the garden bench, looking up at the constellation patterns my father had taught me to recognize decades ago. His advice echoed in my memory. Never make someone a priority who makes you an option. In that moment, under the steady stars, I made a decision. This pattern of disrespect, dismissal, and now deception would not continue. I would not allow it. I cannot continue sacrificing my self-respect for a partnership that exists only on her terms, I said aloud, the words feeling right, necessary. The decision brought neither pain nor regret, just clarity. And with clarity came the need for a plan. What you're describing isn't simply a communication problem, Dr. Levine said, her voice calm and measured. It's a fundamental respect issue. I'd scheduled the appointment after the calendar discovery, needing professional perspective before taking any action. Dr. Levine had been recommended by a colleague who'd navigated his own difficult divorce last year. I've been making excuses, I admitted, attributing it to work stress, adjustment to her new position, but it's been systematic and escalating. Dr. Levine nodded. There's an important distinction between supporting a partner's growth and enabling behavior that undermines the relationship. One builds connection, the other erodes it. I've always tried to be supportive, flexible with her schedule changes, understanding of work demands. And those are admirable qualities. But support isn't the same as self-erasure. What would happen if you expressed your needs more directly? I described the failed kitchen table conversation, Sarah's deflections and counter-accusations. That's a concerning response pattern, Dr. Levine said. When someone immediately deflects accountability and makes the issue about your reaction rather than their action, it's difficult to establish healthy communication. So what are my options? That depends on what you want. Are you looking to repair the relationship, or are you considering separation? The question hung in the air. A month ago, it would have seemed extreme. Now it felt like the logical conclusion to a pattern I could no longer ignore. I think I need to prepare for separation, even if that's not the immediate step. Dr. Levine nodded, without judgment. Then I'd suggest 3 parallel tracks. First, document the pattern, which you've already begun with your journal. Second, consult with appropriate professionals about practical matters. And third, establish clear personal boundaries, regardless of the ultimate outcome. What kind of boundaries? Only you can determine that. What aspects of the current dynamic are most damaging to your well-being? Those are the areas that need immediate boundaries. I thought about it. The public diminishment, the assumption that her time and priorities automatically outrank mine, the invasion of privacy by sharing our personal issues at work. Those are clear examples. Boundaries aren't about controlling the other person's behavior. They're about clarifying what you will and won't accept in your life. I left the session with greater clarity and a practical next step. Consult with a financial advisor about protecting my assets regardless of the outcome. 2 days later, I sat across from Alan Winters, a financial advisor recommended by my company's employee assistance program. I'm not looking to hide assets or act in bad faith, I explained after outlining the situation. I just need to understand my options for financial independence if separation becomes necessary. Alan nodded. That's a responsible approach. Let's start by reviewing your current financial entanglement and identifying areas of vulnerability. We spent the next hour examining accounts, investments, and expenses. The picture that emerged confirmed what I'd suspected. While our incomes were similar, our spending patterns were drastically different. My consistent saving had built the emergency fund and retirement accounts, while Sarah's discretionary spending on luxury items far outpaced mine. Based on what you've shared, I'd recommend several immediate steps, Alan said. First, establish a separate account for your personal income going forward. You're not obligated to commingle funds, even while married. Won't that seem suspicious? Not if done properly. It's prudent financial planning, not deception. Document your reasoning and approach. Second, secure copies of all important financial records. And third, develop a budget based on your individual income rather than your combined resources. What about the house? That's more complicated since it's joint property. I'd recommend consulting with a real estate attorney before making any decisions there. I left with a clear action plan and Alan's assurance that my approach was both legally sound and ethically appropriate. Remember, he'd said, protecting yourself financially isn't punitive, it's prudent. The following week, I viewed an apartment in a quiet complex 15 minutes from my office. The property manager, a friendly woman named Elena, showed me a one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor. Great natural light, she commented, as she opened the blinds to reveal a small balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. The space was modest but well-designed, with built-in bookshelves along one wall, perfect for my collection that Sarah had relegated to the basement as clutter. The bedroom easily accommodated a queen-sized bed, and the kitchen, while small, had new appliances and adequate counter space. There's a study nook in the corner, Elena pointed out. Many of our residents work from home occasionally. I could picture myself here, my books on the shelves, my father's old leather chair by the window, my laptop on the small desk in the study nook. No designer furniture chosen to impress colleagues, no decorative objects that serve no purpose but status. Just a comfortable, functional space that reflected my actual preferences. The lease is for 12 months, but we offer a month-to-month option after that, Elena explained. The security deposit is 1 month's rent, and we require the first month's payment at signing. I thought of Sarah's comment last month about our house being embarrassingly outdated for someone of her professional stature, her constant pressure to renovate perfectly functional spaces to align with current design trends. When would it be available? I asked. The current tenant leaves at the end of this month. You could move in any time after the 5th. I nodded, making a decision. I'd like to apply. As Elena prepared the application forms, I mentally calculated timing. The apartment would be ready just after Sarah's Chicago conference, the one that had replaced our anniversary trip. The synchronicity felt appropriate. Will anyone else be living with you? Elena asked, form in hand. No, I said. Just me. The word felt strange, but right. Just me. After 15 years of us, the concept of singular existence was both daunting and oddly liberating. That evening, I reviewed my journal entries from the past months, the documented pattern of dismissal, disrespect, and deception. I added a new entry: apartment secured, financial boundaries established, professional validation obtained, still uncertain if immediate separation is necessary, but preparations complete if the situation continues or escalates. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Working late. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, noting my lack of surprise or disappointment. When exactly had her absence become preferable to her presence? The question lingered as I prepared for bed alone, the house quiet except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock marking time, counting down to a decision that felt increasingly inevitable. Sarah's Chicago conference coincided with a relatively quiet week at my office. I used the time to finalize my preparations, moving methodically through the checklist I'd developed. Transfer direct deposit to new account. Complete setup automated payment for apartment. Complete secure important documents. In progress. Prepare separation letter outlining practical arrangements. Complete pack essentials for initial move. In progress. There was no joy in these tasks, just the same focused efficiency I brought to project management. This was, in essence, the most important project of my personal life, the reclamation of my dignity. On Thursday, I received Sarah's text. Flight lands at 11:30. We'll probably grab dinner with the team before heading home. I responded with a simple, "Okay, safe travels." No mention of the conference she'd chosen over our anniversary plans. No questions about how it went. The pretense of normal communication felt pointless now. I left work early that day, stopping to purchase 2 matching suitcases, high-quality ones that would withstand frequent travel, the kind Sarah would approve of. At home, I began the careful process of selecting her personal items. I wasn't being vindictive or punitive. I selected her favorite clothes, her essential toiletries, the jewelry she wore most frequently. I included the framed photo of her parents from her nightstand, her favorite books from the shelf, the throw blanket she kept on her side of the couch. Each item was folded or wrapped carefully, placed with consideration. This wasn't about causing pain. It was about establishing a boundary that could no longer be crossed through conversation alone. As I worked, I remembered Dr. Levine's words. Boundaries aren't about controlling the other person's behavior. They're about clarifying what you will and won't accept in your life. I would no longer accept disrespect as the price of partnership. I would no longer pretend that obligation outweighed dignity. By evening, the suitcases were packed and waiting by the front door. I'd prepared a smaller overnight bag for myself, containing just enough for the first few days at the apartment. On the dresser, I placed my house key and the separation letter, which outlined in clear, non-accusatory language my decision to separate temporarily, my new address and contact information, practical arrangements for bills and household matters, a request for space to consider next steps. I ate a simple dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and settled into the living room chair with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hallway, marking time as I waited. At 11:45, I heard a car door outside. Light swept across the living room wall as Sarah's Uber pulled away. The front door opened at precisely midnight, the grandfather clock beginning its 12 sonorous chimes as she entered. She appeared in the living room doorway, surprise registering on her face to find me still awake. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her expression showing the effects of wine at dinner. "I got the attention I wanted," she announced with a smile that never reached her eyes, dropping her keys on the entryway table without looking at me. The statement hung in the air, laden with unspoken meaning. Had she been flirting with colleagues? Was this meant to provoke jealousy? Or was it simply another casual dismissal of my feelings? It didn't matter anymore. "Your bags are ready," I replied, my voice steady despite the months of preparation for this moment. She stared at me blankly before turning to notice the suitcases by the door. Confusion replaced her smug expression. What is this? Exactly what it looks like. I'm taking some space. Because I went to a conference? Don't be ridiculous, John. Not because of the conference. Because of the pattern it represents. I stood, maintaining calm eye contact. There's a letter on the dresser explaining the practical details. Her expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and anger. You're not serious. I am. After everything I've done for this relationship, because of one late night? It's not one late night, Sarah. It's a consistent pattern of disrespect that I've documented for months. The conference you registered for 3 weeks before telling me, erasing our anniversary plans without discussion. The public humiliation at the barbecue. The private conversations shared at your office. The constant dismissal of my time, my career, my contributions. Her eyes narrowed. So, you've been building a case against me, planning this ambush? I've been recognizing a pattern I can no longer ignore or excuse. You're overreacting. This is ridiculous. Her tone shifted suddenly, softening. John, please. I've been under tremendous pressure. So if you felt neglected, we can talk about it tomorrow when I'm not exhausted from travel. We've tried talking. You deflect, minimize, or blame me for being too sensitive. Because you are being too sensitive. This is just temporary stress from my new position. It's been over a year, Sarah. It's not temporary, and it's not about your position. It's about basic respect. She stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm. I do respect you. I love you. Don't throw away 15 years over a misunderstanding. The manipulation was textbook. Deny, minimize, appeal to emotion, create urgency. A month ago, it might have worked. Now, I recognized it for what it was. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm establishing a boundary that should have been clear long ago. I've rented an apartment and moved some essentials there. You can stay here or find other arrangements as you prefer. Her expression hardened as she realized her tactics weren't working. So that's it. You're just walking out? I'm taking space to consider what comes next. The letter explains the practical details. And if I don't accept this? That's your choice. My decision is made. She stepped back, anger replacing the false vulnerability. You'll regret this, John. When you come crawling back, things will be different. I picked up my overnight bag, feeling strangely calm despite her threat. Good night, Sarah. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. This is about your insecurity, not my behavior. You can't handle my success. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that would bridge the fundamentally different realities we occupied. The drive to my new apartment was quiet, my phone buzzing repeatedly with incoming calls from Sarah. I silenced it without checking the messages. Whatever emotional manipulation she was attempting could wait. At the apartment, I used the key Elena had provided earlier that week. The space was empty except for the few essentials I'd arranged to have delivered. An air mattress, basic kitchenware, toiletries. It wasn't comfortable yet, but it was mine. A space without dismissal or disrespect. I silenced my still buzzing phone and prepared for bed, the day's emotional toll finally hitting me. Yet despite the sparse surroundings and significant life change, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. Morning light filtered through the blinds I hadn't fully closed. For a moment, disorientation washed over me before I remembered where I was and why. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from Sarah. I scrolled through them, noting the predictable progression. What the hell, John? Call me now. You're being childish. Come home so we can talk like adults. If this is about the anniversary trip, I'll make it up to you. You're throwing away 15 years over nothing. Please call me. I'm worried about you. I didn't mean what I said. I was tired from traveling. The final messages showed the desperation setting in. I need you. Please come home. I love you. We can fix this. I sent a single response. I'm safe. The letter explains everything. I need space to think. Please respect that. Her reply came instantly. For how long? I don't know yet. That's not fair. I didn't respond. Fairness was a concept Sarah only seemed to invoke when disadvantaged by its absence. I made coffee using the basic machine I'd purchased, carrying the mug to the small balcony. The morning air was cool, the courtyard garden peaceful. From the third floor, I could see over the adjacent buildings to where the sun was rising, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. An unexpected realization struck me. I felt no guilt, no second thoughts, no urge to return and smooth things over as I had so many times before. Just a profound sense of peace, as if I'd finally put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. My phone buzzed with a call from Mark. I answered, knowing he'd be concerned. John, you okay? Sarah's been calling Jennifer since 6 a.m. I'm fine. I moved out last night. A pause. Wow, that's decisive. It was time. What happened? I explained briefly about the conference deception, the midnight return, the prepared suitcases. That took courage, Mark said finally. How are you feeling? Strangely peaceful, like I've been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. Need anything? Furniture? Company? I'm good for now, just starting to figure out next steps. Well, we're here if you need anything. And John? For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. After we hung up, I spent the day setting up my new space, arranging for furniture delivery, organizing utilities, and beginning the practical side of separation. It felt productive rather than painful, like clearing debris after a storm. Sarah continued texting throughout the day, cycling through anger, bargaining, guilt-tripping, and occasional genuine remorse. I maintained minimal, factual responses, refusing to be drawn into emotional manipulation. By evening, I'd created a functional, if sparse, living space. Sitting on my new couch, a comfortable leather one I'd always wanted, but Sarah had dismissed as too masculine, I felt the first real stirrings of liberation, not just from an unhealthy relationship, but from the constant compromise of my own preferences, opinions, and dignity. My journal entry that night was simple. First day of new chapter. Expected pain or regret, found peace instead. The hardest step was the decision, not the execution. 1 week into our separation, I maintained my routine. Work, apartment setup, occasional calls with friends like Mark, who knew the situation. Sarah's communications had settled into a pattern of daily texts, alternating between guilt trips and apparent acceptance. I was in a team meeting when my phone lit up with repeated calls from Sarah. Unusual, given our established text pattern. Excusing myself, I stepped into the hallway to answer. John, I need the joint account password, now. Her voice was tight with controlled panic. Why? What's happened? I'm at Nordstrom, finalizing an order for the client appreciation event. My card was declined, and I need to access the joint account immediately. I took a deep breath. Sarah, I moved my direct deposits to a separate account. I left enough in the joint account to cover the mortgage and utilities for 3 months while we sort things out. You what? Her voice rose sharply. You can't just... That's our money. Actually, it's money I contributed. The separation letter explained I'd be handling my finances separately going forward. I'm standing here with $3,000 of merchandise and no way to pay for it. Use your personal credit card. It's maxed out. The admission confirmed what I'd suspected. Her spending had far outpaced even her executive salary. My financial advisor's warnings about vulnerability had been well-founded. "I'm sorry you're in an uncomfortable position," I said calmly. "But this is exactly why I needed to establish financial boundaries." "This is humiliating," she hissed. "I'm standing here looking like I can't afford basic purchases." "Perhaps reschedule the event until you've sorted out your finances." "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making me look bad?" "No, Sarah. I'm establishing necessary boundaries after years of carrying financial responsibilities that should have been shared." She hung up without responding. I returned to my meeting, apologizing for the interruption, but maintaining my professional composure despite the confrontation. That evening, I received a text from Jennifer, Mark's wife. "Sarah called an emergency girls' night at Castillo's. Just a heads up, she's building a narrative." I appreciated the warning. Castillo's was a restaurant where Sarah and several neighborhood women occasionally gathered. If she was organizing an event there, she was clearly attempting to build social support for her version of events. "Thanks for the info," I replied. I expected something like this. 2 days later, Mark called. "Thought you should know. Sarah's version of events is making the rounds." "Let me guess. I'm having a midlife crisis, abandoning her without warning, punishing her for her success?" "Pretty much. Also, apparently, you're withholding money to control her." I sighed. "Predictable. The thing is, not everyone's buying it." Kathy Wilson was at the dinner, and she told Jennifer that Sarah's story seemed rehearsed, especially after they've all witnessed how she treats you at neighborhood events. "I'm not going to counter-campaign, Mark. The truth will become evident over time." "That's probably wise. Just wanted you to know what's happening." "I appreciate that." The social manipulation continued over the following weeks. Several mutual friends reached out with concerned messages, clearly having heard Sarah's version. I responded consistently with minimal information. "We're taking some space to reassess. I'd prefer not to discuss details out of respect for our privacy." Most seemed to accept this, though a few pressed for Sarah's side of the story, revealing their predetermined allegiance. 3 weeks into our separation, I was working late at my office when the security desk called. "Mr. Anderson, your wife is here." "She doesn't have access, but she's insisting on seeing you." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "Please tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes." In the lobby, Sarah stood near the security desk, dressed impeccably in what I recognized as her power outfit, the tailored suit she wore for important presentations. Her hair and makeup were flawless, clearly arranged for maximum impact. "John," she said as I approached, her voice carrying just the right note of vulnerable strength for any observers. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "There's a coffee shop across the street," I suggested, unwilling to have this conversation in my workplace. The shop was quiet at this hour, with only a few students focused on laptops in the corners. We took a table near the window, away from other customers. "You look well," she said, studying me. "Thank you. What did you want to discuss?" "Us. This separation. It's been almost a month, John." "How long is this space going to last?" "I don't know yet." "That's not a real answer." Her carefully constructed composure slipped slightly. "You can't just put our marriage in limbo indefinitely." "I'm not trying to. I'm taking the time I need to evaluate what's best going forward. What's best is for you to come home. I've realized how much I took you for granted. I miss you." The words sounded rehearsed, like dialogue from a script she'd prepared. Perhaps that was unfair of me, but patterns are difficult to unsee once recognized. "I appreciate that, Sarah. But this isn't about missing each other. It's about fundamental patterns of respect and communication that broke down long before I left. I can change that. I am changing. Her hand reached across the table to touch mine. Work has been more balanced. I've declined 2 business trips to focus on personal priorities. That's positive, I acknowledged. But this isn't about scorekeeping specific behaviors. It's about whether we share the same understanding of what a partnership should be. Her expression hardened slightly. So nothing I do will be enough. You've already decided. I haven't decided anything final. That's why I needed space, to gain clarity without the daily patterns interfering. This is punitive, John. You're punishing me for being successful, for not being the compliant wife who waits at home with dinner ready. And there it was, the familiar deflection, recasting legitimate concerns as my shortcoming rather than addressing the actual issues. This has never been about your success, Sarah. I've supported your career consistently, often at the expense of my own opportunities. This is about basic respect, not interrupting when I speak, not dismissing my contributions, not humiliating me publicly, not sharing private conversations as office entertainment. I apologize for those things. Apologizing isn't the same as changing the pattern. She switched tactics, tears welling in her eyes. I can't lose you, John. You're the only stability I have. With everything so intense at work, knowing you were there kept me grounded. That's part of the problem. I became a function, the reliable support system, rather than a partner. Tell me what you want then. Specifically, what do I need to do to fix this? I shook my head. That's not how this works. If I give you a checklist, you'll perform the behaviors without addressing the underlying attitudes. That's not sustainable. Her expression shifted again, frustration replacing vulnerability. So there's no way forward. You've just decided our marriage is over? I haven't decided anything definitively. I'm still processing and evaluating. While I just wait, for how long, John? Weeks? Months? Years? I don't have that answer yet. I wish I did. She stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're being completely unreasonable. I understand it feels that way to you. Don't therapists speak me? Her voice rose, drawing glances from the students. Noticing the attention, she lowered her voice, but maintained the intensity. You've made your point. You're upset about feeling underappreciated. Message received. Now it's time to act like an adult and work on our marriage. That's what I'm trying to do, by gaining the clarity I need first. She gathered her purse, her movements sharp with anger. Fine, have your clarity. But remember, John, relationships require compromise. You can't have everything exactly your way. The irony of her statement was almost painful. I'm well aware of that, Sarah. After she left, I remained at the table, processing the interaction. Despite the emotional manipulation attempts, I felt no urge to follow her, to apologize, to smooth things over. The pattern was so clear now, so predictable. Back at my apartment, I added to my journal. First in-person confrontation, same tactics, deflection, blame shifting, victim positioning, attempt at emotional manipulation. Felt no pull to rescue or accommodate. Progress. 6 months after that coffee shop conversation, my apartment had transformed from a temporary refuge to a true home. Bookshelves lined the wall beside the balcony door, filled with volumes that had previously been relegated to boxes in our garage. My father's leather chair occupied the corner by the window, perfect for morning coffee and reading. The space wasn't large, but it reflected my actual preferences rather than compromised decor designed to impress others. Work had improved as well. Without the constant drain of navigating an unhealthy relationship, I found renewed energy for projects and mentoring junior team members. I'd accepted a lateral move to a division focusing on emerging technologies, a position Sarah had once dismissed as career suicide, but which I found intellectually stimulating and professionally rewarding. My social connections had evolved naturally. Some mutual friends had drifted toward Sarah's orbit, while others maintained relationships with both of us separately. Mark and Jennifer remained steadfast supporters, often including me in neighborhood gatherings that Sarah no longer attended. Legal separation papers had been filed 3 months after my departure, when it became clear that reconciliation wasn't likely. Sarah had initially contested, then reluctantly agreed when her attorney advised that prolonging the process wouldn't change the outcome. I was having lunch with a potential client when an unexpected figure approached our table. Melissa Chen, Robert's wife and Sarah's former colleague. "John, I thought that was you. Sorry to interrupt." "Melissa, hello. This is David from TechWave." "David, Melissa Chen." After brief pleasantries, David excused himself to take a call, giving us a moment of privacy. "I heard about your separation," Melissa said. "I'm sorry things didn't work out." "Thank you. It was for the best." She hesitated, then continued. "There's something I've felt I should tell you, but it never seemed appropriate. Maybe it still isn't. But with everything finalized..." "What is it?" 3 years ago, when you were considering that position with Global Systems, Sarah told everyone you'd declined it because you weren't confident enough to take the risk." I frowned. "I never declined it. Sarah told me they went with an internal candidate." Melissa looked uncomfortable. "That's not what happened. She told Marcus, our VP at the time, that you'd be unwilling to relocate even temporarily because you were, quote, too comfortable in your safe little project management role." The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, given what I now understood about Sarah's patterns, but it still stung. The Global Systems position had represented a significant opportunity, one I'd been excited about despite the temporary relocation requirement. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "I ran into Sarah last week. She was not doing well, blaming everyone else for her current challenges. It reminded me of how she'd talk about you, and it never sat right with me." She paused. "I guess I wanted you to know you made the right decision. You deserved better." After Melissa left and David returned, I managed to maintain professional focus, but her revelation lingered in my mind. It provided final confirmation of a pattern I'd already recognized, but still found painful to acknowledge. That evening, I received an unexpected invitation from my neighbors, an older couple who had recently moved into the apartment across the hall. They were hosting a small gathering and thought I might enjoy meeting some new people. The gathering was pleasant, a diverse group ranging from young professionals to retirees, all connected through various community activities. I found myself engaged in genuinely interesting conversations, without the constant awareness of being diminished or interrupted that had characterized social events with Sarah. Eleanor, a recently widowed former literature professor in her early 60s, proved particularly engaging. Her quick wit and thoughtful perspectives on books we'd both enjoyed led to an extended conversation on the building's rooftop terrace. "It's refreshing to have a neighbor who reads actual books," she commented. "The gentleman who lived in your unit before was nice enough, but seemed to consider Netflix a literary genre." I laughed. "I've probably been overcompensating since the separation, finally displaying all the books my ex-wife considered clutter." "Ah, the liberation of reclaimed space," she smiled. "I went through something similar after Harold died. Not that our situations compare, but there's a similar process of rediscovering your individual identity after being part of a we for so long." Her insight struck me as profound. "That's exactly it," I'm remembering who I was before compromising became my default setting. It's a worthwhile journey, she said. Painful at times, but necessary. We exchanged book recommendations and agreed to coffee the following week. A simple, uncomplicated connection based on mutual interests and respect. Later that evening, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and purples. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined the peace I now felt, the sense of rightness in my decision despite its difficulty. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, the first in several weeks since the legal separation was finalized. Thought you should know I'm accepting a position in Chicago. Fresh start. I replied simply, I wish you well. Her response came quickly. That's it? After 15 years? I considered carefully before responding. What happened between us was unfortunate, but I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah. You too, John. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, nor complete closure, but it was an acknowledgement that we were both moving forward, separately. I remained on the balcony until the last colors faded from the sky, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain had been necessary, the boundary essential. What had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, the start of reclaiming dignity too long compromised. Tomorrow I'd have coffee with Eleanor. Next week, dinner with Mark and Jennifer. The following month, a professional conference I'd been invited to speak at. Simple pleasures, authentic connections, genuine respect. It was enough, more than enough. It was, at last, a life aligned with my own truth. Many fear that enforcing boundaries means facing life alone, as if dignity and companionship are mutually exclusive choices. Yet John's journey reveals a profound truth. Ending a relationship that diminishes your worth isn't failure, it's growth. The peace he discovered wasn't despite being alone, but because he'd finally aligned his life with his values. Respect isn't a luxury in relationships. It's the foundation without which nothing healthy can stand. The courage required to establish boundaries after years of compromise shouldn't be underestimated. Perhaps you recognize elements of John's story in your own relationships. The small dismissals that grew into patterns, the excuses made to preserve peace, the gradual erosion of self-respect in service of stability. Remember that years invested don't obligate continued investment in disrespect. Dignity becomes more essential, not less, as our life experience deepens. John's father's wisdom, never make someone a priority who makes you an option, took on new meaning through lived experience. We often possess knowledge intellectually long before we're ready to implement it emotionally. True maturity lies not in knowing what's right, but in finding the strength to act on that knowledge, even when the immediate path seems more difficult. I invite you to assess your own relationships honestly, not with an eye toward discarding them, but with the courage to acknowledge where boundaries might need strengthening. Value your dignity as essential rather than optional. Remember that genuine peace comes not from avoiding difficult truths, but from aligning with them. And perhaps you know someone who needs this reminder that sometimes the quietest act of courage is simply packing a suitcase and saying, "Enough."